I was the man of my dreams, deeply in love, finally becoming the married couple I'd always envisioned. Our wedding ceremony, a culmination of my fondest dreams, was adorned with blessings from many. I imagined my parents in heaven rejoicing, but little did I know, tragedy lurked ahead. Their betrayal shattered everything. I'll never forgive them for what they've done. I'm Mary. Thomas, my boyfriend 2 years my senior, proposed to me, and at 27, we tied the knot. I lost my father in my youth and my mother succumbed to illness 2 years back. Through it all, Thomas has been my unwavering support, lifting me in my darkest hours. Our wedding, on the anniversary of 2.5 years together, marked the start of our joyous journey as newlyweds. With Thomas's demanding job, we postponed the ceremony until the schedule eased. On his days off, we visited the venue, laying the groundwork for our special day. With the date set, it was time to compile our guest list. I was blessed with an aunt and uncle who embraced me as their own daughter. After losing my father, they stepped in, showering me with cooked meals in place of my busy working mother. Their presence filled the void when she was away, ensuring I never felt alone. When illness struck my mother, they shouldered her responsibilities, sparing me the weight of it all. Even in the darkest moments, my aunt's gentle reassurances buoyed my spirits, urging me to hold on to hope for my mother's recovery. With their unwavering support, I found the strength to weather any storm. It's why, when planning my wedding, I insisted they occupy seats reserved for family. Eager to convey my gratitude, I made a long overdue visit to their home. "Mary, congratulations on your marriage," my aunt greeted me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Auntie. I've been thinking, I want you and Uncle to sit in the seats reserved for family at my wedding. Would that be all right?" "Of course," she replied, her voice filled with warmth as she reached for a large box. "Mary, why don't you open this?" Curious, I obliged, lifting the lid to reveal a stunning white wedding dress nestled inside. Crafted from exquisite silk, it exuded elegance with a touch of charm. Delicate lace adorned the neckline, while intricate flower embroideries danced along the hem, lending it an undeniable allure. Smaller in size, it was evident this dress was tailored just for me. Instantly enamored, I gasped in delight. "Why this dress?" I inquired. "Well, your mother, my sister, she made it," my aunt explained softly. "What? Mom made this?" I exclaimed, disbelief coloring my voice. "Yes. Despite her illness, she poured her heart into every stitch, envisioning this day for you. She asked me to give it to you if ever you married. This dress embodies all the love she held in her final days. Mary, you must wear it at your wedding. It would mean the world to her," my aunt said, her eyes shimmering with tears and affectionate pride. Touched by her gesture, tears welled up in my eyes. "Thank you, Auntie. Holding on to this means everything to me. I'll cherish it, I promise," clutching my mother's handcrafted wedding dress tightly, my heart brimming with happiness. Upon returning home, I reverently hung the dress on my bedroom wall, its presence a comforting reminder of my mother's love. Determined to honor her at my wedding, I envisioned the day with renewed determination. But fate had other plans. Disaster struck one evening when I returned home from work to find the dress missing from its rightful place on my wall. Shocked and bewildered, I frantically searched the room, my heart sinking as reality set in. How could this happen? It was right here, I whispered, the weight of loss settling heavily upon me. In a panic, I reached for my phone to dial the police. Just then, my husband walked through the door. "Mary, what's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face as he hurried to my side. "My dress, it's gone. I had it right here," I sobbed, gesturing to the empty space on the wall. "I think someone took it." My distress seemed to startle my husband, and his response caught me off guard. "Oh, is that all?" he remarked casually, prompting me to question him further. "What do you mean, Thomas? Do you know something?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. His revelation left me stunned. "Well, yes. My sister mentioned she needed a dress for her upcoming wedding and wanted to borrow yours," he confessed. "What?" I gasped incredulously, realizing he had lent my precious wedding dress without consulting me. It dawned on me then that she had used the spare key from our mailbox to retrieve it. He handed my dress over to his sister without consulting me. I was beyond disbelief, my anger boiling over as I confronted him. "How could you do this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. His nonchalant response only fueled my frustration. "Our wedding is still months away, so what's the harm?" he reasoned, as if it were inconsequential. And my sister was ecstatic. She's tight on funds and saw it as a saving grace. Saving grace? I never authorized any of this. I shot back, seething at his lack of consideration. That dress was a labor of love from my mother, made specifically for me. Did you forget, Thomas? It's tailored to perfection. How could you lend it out without my consent? His attempt to pacify me only infuriated me further. Relax, it's not like it's a one-time use item. You'll still get to wear it. So what's the problem? He insisted. The problem? It's crystal clear. Why should your sister wear my dress before I do? It's just plain wrong, no matter how you spin it. Despite my efforts to convey my frustration, my husband remained obstinate, refusing to apologize or acknowledge his error. His dismissive attitude only fueled my anger further. Mary, you're overreacting. You need to stop acting like a spoiled child, he retorted, his words a stinging rebuke. Spoiled? How can you say that? This dress holds sentimental value. It was made by my mother for me. It's nonsensical for your sister to wear it before me, I countered, exasperated by his callousness. His indifference pushed me to my breaking point. I'm going to your parents' house tomorrow to retrieve the dress, I declared firmly. Tomorrow? But that's when my sister's fiancé and his parents are visiting, he interjected. Your parents' house, and you think I should just sit back and let them decide? I snapped, incredulous. Let me be clear. Regardless of anyone's opinion, I refuse to allow your sister to wear that dress. The following day, I took a break from work to confront my sister-in-law. Upon reaching my in-laws' home, the lively chatter from within greeted me as I approached the open front door. Stealthily entering, I overheard unfamiliar voices engaged in conversation. You made this dress yourself? That's incredible, Cynthia. A man's voice praised, referring to my sister-in-law. Cynthia, basking in the admiration, modestly deflected the compliment. Oh, it was nothing, she downplayed, proudly showcasing my mother's meticulously crafted wedding dress to her fiancé and his parents. A surge of emotions welled up within me as I listened, my heart heavy with indignation. Claim of creating her dream dress struck a nerve. That dress was a symbol of my mother's love, crafted expressly for me. Without realizing it, I found myself drawn towards them, propelled by a mix of anger and hurt. Storming through the entrance, I snatched the wedding dress from my sister-in-law's grasp and declared, "This belongs to me," in front of the astonished onlookers. All eyes turned towards me, except for my sister-in-law, who paled at my assertiveness. Cynthia, is this true? Her fiancé questioned, prompting her to offer a feeble defense. No, it's not what you think. I really did make it myself. Realizing the futile nature of the conversation, I turned my attention back to Cynthia. Why don't you try it on then? My mother tailored it to fit me perfectly. It won't suit you. It was evident that the dress, designed for my petite stature, wouldn't flatter her taller, more athletic frame. What's going on? My husband's voice cut through the tension, finally making an appearance. My sister must have called him. He fumed, his face flushed with anger. Mary, what on earth are you doing? Are you trying to sabotage my sister's wedding? Sabotage. If anything, it's my wedding that's in jeopardy. I shot back at my husband, bracing myself for another outburst. Just stop. We called off our wedding, so hand over that dress to my sister. What? Called off? I stammered in disbelief. That's correct. We called it off, he asserted firmly. My sister mentioned she's tight on funds, so we decided to gift her the $50,000 we saved for our wedding. And since we're not getting married anymore, we don't need that dress, do we? You lent out my dress without asking, canceled our wedding, and gave away the $50,000 we saved. Have you lost your mind? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Our marriage held little importance to him. With a heavy heart, I fell silent, feeling my love for my husband wane. Canceling the wedding was one thing, but I wanted to cherish this dress forever. And now, because of these thoughtless actions, just then, my sister-in-law's fiancé rose to his feet, his voice heavy with resignation. I guess that settles it. What? Everyone was stunned. Wait, you can't be serious. You're calling off our engagement. Why? In response to my sister-in-law's plea, her fiancé fixed her with a steely glare. Why? It's plain as day. I can't marry someone who's capable of such deceit without a second thought. It's out of the question. Even his parents mirrored his sentiments, their quiet anger evident. Well, that settles that. No more talk of marriage, my fiancé declared, ready to leave with his parents. But just as they were about to depart, My sister-in-law burst in, frantic and desperate. Hold on a minute. It's ridiculous to call off the engagement over something like this, isn't it? Mom, Dad, you don't agree, do you? Despite her impassioned pleas to her parents, it was too late. Why are you glaring at me, Mom, Dad? My sister-in-law's plea fell on deaf ears as her father erupted with force. Get out, you disgrace. His words struck like a blow, reducing my typically resilient sister-in-law to tears. How could you be so heartless? This is too much, she sobbed. Stop crying. I don't recognize you anymore. Her father rebuked, his voice filled with disappointment. I can't accept someone who shows such disregard for others' feelings as my daughter, her mother added sternly. Witnessing his sister's distress, my husband stepped forward to intervene. Mom, Dad, please calm down. There's no need to blame Cynthia like this. And you, Thomas, how dare you overlook Mary's feelings? Leave this house with Cynthia, his father added, his tone unwavering. You foolish son, his father's words rang out, stunning my husband into silence, his expression one of disbelief. Then, to my surprise, my mother-in-law approached me, bowing her head in apology. I'm deeply sorry, Mary. We were misled to believe that the dress was handmade by our daughter. No, it's all right, but I can't continue living with Thomas, I responded, my heart heavy with resolve. That's understandable. Our daughter is at fault here. You should move forward with your life without any concerns, she assured me. Her words struck a chord within me. Despite the turmoil, I couldn't shake the guilt of parting ways with my in-laws who had always treated me with kindness. Nonetheless, staying with Thomas was no longer an option. Mary, I'm sorry. Truly, I am. We'll make things right. Have a proper wedding. Please don't mention divorce, my husband pleaded, his tone shifting dramatically after his parents disowned him. But I couldn't fathom reconciling with a man devoid of spine. I'm forging my own path now. I can find happiness without you. His plea fell on deaf ears as I stood firm in my decision. Witnessing my resolve, my husband sank to his knees in defeat. After bidding my in-laws a heartfelt farewell, I left their home, packing my belongings and seeking refuge at my aunt's house. Though initially surprised, she respected my decision and welcomed me with open arms. My aunt skillfully repaired the torn dress, restoring its former glory. With my mother's dress refurbished, I sought alimony from my ex-husband, and we finalized our divorce. Unbeknownst to me, he had been diverting our wedding funds to my sister-in-law, which resulted in a slightly higher settlement for me. Both my husband and sister-in-law faced the consequences of their actions and were disowned by their parents, now residing together in our former home. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law, who had planned to be a homemaker, found herself jobless after quitting her job. Now, my ex-husband bore the sole responsibility of supporting them both. Reflecting on my experience, I resolved to be more discerning in choosing a partner if given another chance at marriage, ensuring a beautiful wedding while wearing my mother's cherished handmade dress.
I really thought Mom had a lot of money saved up. I mentioned it before, right? It's time to kick her out. Why keep a jobless person here? I've been living here for 3 months, and my son and his wife used up all my savings. They treated me badly. I had enough, so I left quietly. Then, my son called me. Mom, what's happening? Tony sounded worried on the phone. Around that time, something I did became big news across the United States. I'm Sarah, and I'm 70 years old. I lived in France for a while, but I got sick, so I came back to the States. My old apartment was gone, so I asked my son and his wife if I could stay with them for a bit. Tony, my only son, is 44 and works in an office. He and his wife, Alice, don't have kids, and they live quietly. We lost touch while I was away, but I decided to reconnect, and Tony seemed happy to hear from me. I explained my situation and asked if I could stay for a while. Tony agreed, though he seemed unsure. It felt awkward to rely on them, but the happiness of being with family again outweighed my doubts. With a mix of nerves and happiness, I took a taxi from the airport to their house. When I got there, Tony and Alice greeted me at the door. Tony seemed glad to see me, but Alice looked upset. I plan to stay here for a few months. My stuff will arrive later, I said, leaving my carry-on bag and heading to the living room. We talked about our lives, jobs, and my time in France. When Tony asked why I moved there, I just said, I wanted to enjoy the French countryside as I get older. Tony laughed, but Alice stayed unhappy. We also talked about my health issues. I've been dizzy a lot, and might have Meniere's disease. Sometimes I can't stand and feel sick when it happens. I don't feel safe living alone, so I want to stay with them until I feel better. After our chat, I went to get my stuff for my carry-on. As I organized it in the hallway, I heard Tony and Alice talking. "Are you serious about letting Sarah stay?" "I don't want to live with an old woman. She's my mom," Alice said. "You're not always home because you work part-time," Tony replied. "But what about when we're off work? How long is she staying?" "I want her gone," Alice insisted. "Mom will leave eventually. Let's talk about money tomorrow. Just keep it down, she might hear you," Tony warned. "She can't hear us, she's old." "Old age brings sharp ears for insults," Alice said. There I was hearing their conversation in the hallway. I felt bad for suddenly staying with Tony and his wife. It must be hard for them, but I'm happy to spend time with them after so long. When Tony was young, I raised him alone after my husband died. We didn't have much, and Tony faced difficulties with his health. This doesn't make up for that, but I came here to apologize and show gratitude. It's a shame I'm not welcome, but they have their own lives. I went to the guest room they gave me, trying to calm my anxious heart. The next morning, Tony went to work, leaving just Alice and me at home. While I was doing some crafting in the living room, Alice came up to me. "Hey Sarah, can you clean up this mess?" I looked around and saw fabric scraps and threads scattered about. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll clean it up. Do you want to see what I'm making?" I showed her the small pouch I was sewing, with a little green turtle design. "It's a turtle pouch. I love turtles, so I make crafts with turtle themes. It even has a zipper on its shell," I explained. "That's nice, Sarah, but you can't stay here all day. Find somewhere else to go when I'm not working. You're in the way," Alice said, cutting me off, clearly uninterested. "But I get dizzy if I go outside too much," I protested. "I'll drive you to the nearby community center to stay during the day. I have things to do at home," Alice said firmly, without room for discussion. She added, "And while you're here, help with the chores. You're not just here to relax. Since we're letting you stay, do some cleaning and laundry instead of crafting." Stunned, I finally replied, "Okay," and slowly got up from the armchair. Despite feeling dizzy and sore, I ended up doing all the housework. Alice and Tony treated me like a housekeeper, and it seemed like Alice hadn't been keeping up with chores before I arrived. That night, when Tony got home, he asked, "Mom, did you bring your banking card?" He spoke with a smile. "I don't mind you living with us, but life costs money. Could you chip in?" I looked at Tony, nodded, and stood up. I took out my banking card from my handmade pouch and handed it to him. He checked it quickly, and his face tightened. "Wait, Mom, is this all you have saved? Any other accounts?" I replied, "That's all I have. I don't need much at my age. No chronic illnesses or anything." I smiled as the conversation continued, but Tony's expression darkened. "This isn't enough money, not even $10,000. You said you were living well abroad, so I assumed." Tony kept pressing me, asking if I had more money. When I said no, he sighed and slumped his shoulders. "Okay, I'll hold on to this cash for now. I'm doing you a favor by letting you live here, so this is the least you could do." After getting my account password, Tony took my bank and debit cards and left the room. That night, lying in bed, I could hear Tony muttering through the wall that separated our rooms. "This is disappointing. I thought Mom was wealthy. Our household is actually struggling financially. We shouldn't have let her stay. We gain nothing from having her here." They sounded confident, talking openly in the next room. Maybe they wanted me to hear them. In my cold bed, I fought back tears of loneliness and sadness. The next day, since Alice had a day off, she drove me to the local community center. When I opened my bag to continue my crafting, I realized I forgot the fabric I needed at home. I hesitated to ask Alice to go back and get it. Luckily, my dizziness wasn't too bad that day, so I decided to walk home to fetch it since I knew the area well. As I approached the house, I glanced through the window and saw Alice with a man I didn't recognize. They seemed very close, and I hesitated outside for a moment before deciding not to interrupt them. It dawned on me that maybe they wanted me out so I wouldn't interfere with whatever was going on between them. Back at the community center, thoughts of Alice and the man kept swirling in my mind, so I decided to call someone for advice. From then on, I avoided bringing up the situation and continued interacting with Tony and his wife as usual. However, whenever I left the house, I made sure to leave a red turtle pouch conspicuously on the living room side table. 3 months had gone by since I moved in with Tony's family. By then, I had essentially become the household's maid. When I was home, I had to do endless chores, and when Alice was around, I was sent off to the community center. Most of my savings had been drained by Tony, who had a gambling addiction. He spent most of his free time on lotteries and slots, likely stemming from financial hardships he faced as a child. At first, I tried to talk to him about it, but it always ended in anger. After enduring 3 months of hardship, I reached my breaking point. One night before a long weekend, I decided to address something I've been pondering. Tony, Alice, I want to thank you for letting me stay with you. Tony, I know I caused difficulties for you when you were young due to our financial situation. I apologize for any trouble I've caused, but I'm grateful. I presented a homemade turtle pouch from the table. It was green with a zipper on the shell. This is a token of my appreciation to both of you. I hope you'll accept it. To my surprise, neither Tony nor Alice showed any interest in my handmade gift. Mom, enough of that. Can't we access some funds from your French account or something? Tony suggested. I already told you there's no more money. Look, I put a lot of effort into making this. Can't you accept it as a gesture of love? Remember how happy you used to be when I filled the shell with candy and a bit of pocket money? Tony's irritation grew. I'm not a child anymore. I don't find joy in receiving something like this, Sarah. How much longer do you plan to depend on us? Frankly, it's irritating. Tony and his wife exchanged a cold look, appearing desperate. I asked Tony, do you remember Joe? He helped us out in that old apartment we lived in. What? I don't remember. Stop bringing up old stories, Tony replied sharply. A heavy silence settled between us as I held onto the turtle pouch tightly, feeling the paper inside. The next day, Tony and his wife went on vacation, leaving me behind. After our conversation the previous night, I had already planned to leave the house. I quickly packed my bags with the arranged carrier and sent them off to my home in France. I made sure to include the red turtle pouch in my carry-on bag. Leaving a brief note of gratitude and farewell on the table, I walked out of the house where I had stayed for 3 months. After leaving the house, I didn't immediately return home. Instead, I stayed in a hotel in the US for a while. I had matters to attend to, and I figured Tony and his wife would reach out to me eventually. True to my expectations, about 2 weeks later, Tony called. Mom, what's the deal with the turtle pouch? It's yours, right? Tony's voice sounded frantic over the phone. Oh, you noticed? I replied calmly. I wasn't surprised when I saw the news on TV about the turtle-shaped pouch. Inside it was a check for $1 million. It was my way of expressing gratitude for all they'd done and apologizing for any trouble I caused them when Tony was young. Some might think it shallow to make amends with money, but I had dreamed of this day for over 40 years, saving up bit by bit. Before meeting Tony after so long, I did some research and discovered he was in debt. He had tried to clear his gambling debts by gambling more, only to sink deeper. Despite having a steady job, he couldn't break free from the cycle. I simply wanted him to pay off his debts and find peace. However, they refused my gesture, forgetting the kindness they had once shown my family. So I decided to split the $1 million check into smaller amounts and donate it to charities and welfare organizations across America. I placed the donations in the handmade turtle pouch and sent them anonymously. The turtle pouch became a sensation, making headlines and trending on social media. Alice, isn't that the turtle pouch? Someone commented online. Yeah, looks like it, another remarked. Yes, that's the one. I was planning to give them filled with money too, I replied. I see. Well, he could have just told us. We would have accepted it. If you didn't want my feelings, then you don't need my money either. Tony's voice was angry over the phone. It's my money. How dare you deceive me? Give it back, he demanded. I couldn't bear to listen to Tony's anger any longer, so I pulled the phone away from my ear. After a moment, I spoke. All right, calm down. You're giving me a headache. There's one more turtle. And if you really want it, it's yours. Tony eventually settled down and insisted on having the turtle. We agreed to meet later at a cafe. On the appointed day, I brought the last red turtle in an envelope to our meeting spot. Tony and his wife were already there, demanding the money before I even sat down. When I silently pulled out the red turtle, Tony snatched it immediately, unzipping its shell. But instead of finding a check, he found a small electronic device. What the heck is this? Tony was confused. He found a tiny button and pressed it. A voice started playing, and Alice, standing next to Tony, turned pale. Seated next to Tony, Alice's expression changed as she heard a voice recording. It was her own, speaking warmly with another man who wasn't Tony. What is this? Why? What's happening? Alice seemed to finally understand that it was a recording of her having an affair at home. She tried to grab the recorder from Tony's hand, but he held on tight. While they struggled, I opened the envelope. I brought out several pictures and laid them on the table, showing Alice cheating with another man at home. Faced with undeniable evidence, Alice was flustered and kept asking, why? Why? Tony picked up the photos one by one, studying them closely. Something didn't feel right since I arrived at your house. A friend suggested I hire someone to find out, and even offered to cover the costs. Why would you do this? What's wrong with you? Alice's voice trembled. Well, you're my son's wife. It's heartbreaking to think family would deceive each other. Maybe you'll understand when you're older. Fate brought me here to uncover your infidelity, Alice. Have you been lying to me this whole time? Tony's disappointment was evident in his voice. Tony, when did this start? You have secrets too. If you're saying she cheated, you need to admit your mistakes, Alice argued. I never cheated, but what about the money you owe? Tony went quiet, and Alice took her turn to speak. What about you spending all your money on gambling? I only use the money I earn, and you have a part-time job, so you should have some savings, Alice replied. As I listened to their argument, it was obvious this couple had been holding on somehow until now. Both of you are broke. Tony, you owe $40,000. Alice, you've been giving all your earnings to your other person. I had someone check your finances too, I interrupted. Both Tony and Alice were really surprised, and they started yelling at each other. I was stunned when I found out about the investigation results. This couple was really close to running out of money. Listen, if we get Mom's money, we can pay off the debt. So just give it to us already, Tony insisted. I already gave away all the money. The only thing left is this red turtle statue, I clarified. He spent all my savings on gambling, remember? Tony accused Alice. What? No way. All of it? Alice's eyes widened in shock. In a fit of anger, Tony lunged at me across the table. Other people in the cafe started paying attention, and the staff rushed over. The $1 million was supposed to be mine. It's mine. Give it back, Tony shouted. Soon, the police had to be called to calm Tony down. After they talked to him, they kindly escorted me back to my hotel because I was worried about Tony's aggressive behavior. A week later, Tony and Alice's relationship had fallen apart completely because of the affair and money problems. They got divorced. Tony, now single, got even more caught up in gambling and debt. He was caught trying to steal money from his job and was fired. To make things worse, his angry outburst in the cafe was recorded and shared on social media, making it hard for him to find another job. Unable to face the embarrassment, Tony cut off all contact and disappeared. After the divorce, Alice didn't have anyone to depend on, so she moved into an old public housing unit and lived alone. Just as I was about to make a donation to help rescue turtles, a post I made online joking about my own turtle went viral. Alice started experiencing harassment and stalking because of it, which eventually spread to her part-time job and got her fired. Even the man she was having an affair with got tired of her and left. Now she doesn't have any income and is relying on temporary assistance for needy families. After that, I went back to my home in France. Once I finished unpacking in my apartment, I changed into a dress smoothly. While I was going over some work documents, I heard a noise at the door. It seemed Joe, my roommate, had come back home. Hey, Madam President. Welcome back. How was your trip to America? Joe greeted me with a smile as he hung up his coat and put down his bags. Hey Joe, I'm back, and look, I brought back so many souvenirs, I said excitedly. Wow, all my favorites. Thanks. I'll bring some to the storytelling event at the community center tomorrow, Joe said happily. Joe carefully examined each souvenir on the table, his face glowing with delight. After we both got back on our feet, Joe and his wife moved away for work. Years later, we unexpectedly met in the city, and I started helping with a support program for people in need that Joe had started. By then, Joe's wife had passed away, and we began working together as partners in both business and life. I've been leading the organization since Joe retired a few years ago. What began as a small initiative by Joe and his late wife has grown into a large international organization over the past 30 years. Currently, our focus is on helping single moms raise their children. A few years ago, we moved to France to study their advanced support systems. While we've become well known in France, we're still not widely recognized in America. I plan to expand our activities there soon and wanted to spend some time with Tony and his family just as a mother before they found out about my work. In the end, I couldn't get them to understand how I felt. But that's their decision. Even though it was brief, I was happy to spend time together as a family. Now at 70 years old, I believe age is just a number. There's still so much I want and need to accomplish. I straightened my back in my dress and began pondering my upcoming international speech for tomorrow. See, it's clear now. All the money goes to your brother, as stated in the will. No need to doubt it, said the person in charge of the will. What? Are we really allowed to take all this money? My husband asked, looking at me and my happy sister-in-law. The will says that my brother gets the whole $100 million inheritance from our father. I feel really sad reading it. Does this mean I've lost everything and have to stay with this terrible man forever? But then, my brother says one thing that changes everything. My name is Catherine. I'm 55 years old, and I'm a housewife. My husband's name is Robert, and we've been together without any children. Robert is what you might call a typical male chauvinist. Ever since we got married, he's been in charge, and I haven't been able to speak up or share my opinions. Robert is 10 years older than me. He doesn't treat me with any respect. I feel like I'm his servant, always doing household chores. And if I do something he doesn't like, he's quick to criticize me. He even blames me for us not having children, which makes me cry almost every day. I've thought about divorcing him, but I don't want to worry my family, and I don't have the money to support myself. So I've been enduring his mistreatment and trying to stay strong despite his hurtful words. The only person who gave me any emotional support was my father. My father used to be a successful businessman. He built a company from nothing and turned it into a big company. Even though he worked a lot, he cared for my brother and me in his own way. But after my mother died in a car accident shortly after I got married, my father threw himself into work even more, maybe to distract himself from the loneliness. It was clear that my father's excessive work had taken a toll on him. He had a stroke and had to go to the hospital. Thankfully, his life wasn't in danger, but he was paralyzed on his left side. This was the cost of pushing himself too hard for so long. I managed to convince him to retire. I was worried about him being alone, so I convinced my husband, and we moved in with my father. Once he stopped working, my father seemed to age quickly. He started showing signs of dementia and soon became bedridden and needed constant care. Taking care of my father on top of everything else was overwhelming. I had to handle the housework, look after my husband, and now take care of my father, who had dementia. Sometimes he would be quiet, but other times he would yell and move around a lot, especially at night, or he would wander off. I was always tired from lack of sleep, stress, and the constant work. But sometimes my father would have moments of clarity, and we could talk peacefully like we used to. He would often thank me and sadly smile, saying, "I want to leave you with as much as I can." After 3 years of taking care of my father, he passed away. While I felt relief from the burden of caring for him, losing my father, who was my only emotional support, left me feeling incredibly lonely and sad. My only hope now was my father's inheritance. The inheritance amounted to $100 million, which would be split evenly between my brother and me, making it $50 million for each of us. With that much money, I could finally escape from my awful husband. It was my only chance for a better life. A few days later, my husband Robert and our eldest son's wife Naomi called me to discuss the inheritance. My brother, Naomi's husband, had been working overseas for a while. He came back for the funeral but had just left again yesterday, so Naomi was there in his place. "We found your dad's will in the back of a drawer. Luckily, it wasn't sealed. So let's take a look at it right away," Naomi said. "A will? I didn't know there was one. I was taking care of my father every day, but I never saw him writing a will. It bothered me that my husband, who didn't care much for my father, knew about it." I felt uneasy and had a bad feeling, Catherine thought. "Let's read it," Robert suggested. "All of my assets will be inherited by my eldest son Ken. dated April 1st, John Smith. Naomi read aloud. That's it? Catherine couldn't believe what she was hearing. She always thought her father's estate would be split equally between her and her brother. It was hard to believe that all of her father's $100 million estate would go only to her brother. Well, hold on a second. That doesn't make sense. Why would it be like that? Catherine questioned. My husband handed me the will and urged me to look at myself as I started to panic. Sure enough, it was written in the will, with my father's signature. I immediately suspected that the will might be fake. My father had always been fair to both my brother and me, and he wouldn't have favored just one of us. But could my kind and honest brother really keep all the inheritance for himself? As I pondered this, my brother's wife burst into laughter. Wow, we get to keep all of his money. It feels a bit wrong, but if that's what he wanted, we have to respect it, right? She said. I couldn't accept this at all. As I held the will silently, both my husband and my brother's wife glared at me. Hey, are you doubting this? If so, you can bring in a handwriting expert or something. Just because it's inconvenient for you doesn't mean you can start doubting it. You really have a bad attitude, my husband scolded. I'll do that, Catherine murmured quietly, deciding to have the will checked by an expert. To my surprise, the results showed that the will was undoubtedly written by my father himself. I was disappointed and fell into despair, thinking about the past. I had spent my life taking care of my husband and my father, enduring my husband's anger and hurtful words. It was painful, but the time I spent with my father was happy. I believe he cared for me too. The thought that my beloved father didn't care about me was more shocking and unbearable than not receiving the inheritance. I might have to leave this familiar house and land because they are part of my father's estate. My hope of divorcing my husband also seemed impossible now. When I told my husband about the appraisal result of the will at home over the weekend, he sneered at me with a self-righteous face. That settles it. All the inheritance goes to your brother. Don't go meddling in things anymore. The will was real. Always doubting, you worthless wife, he said, leaving the house after saying those words. Lately, my husband has been spending a lot of time away from home. He comes home from work very late, and he's often not home on weekends like this. I found it suspicious, but I tried to avoid seeing my husband as much as possible. Surprisingly, I felt relieved. Despite my husband's objections, I wanted to talk to my brother directly about the inheritance. Even though he worked overseas and was always busy, he was a kind and dependable person. I made sure beforehand that he wasn't too busy, then I gave him a call. After exchanging some brief greetings, my brother once again apologized for leaving the care of our father entirely to me and thanked me for handling the funeral and various procedures. Don't worry about it. By the way, Robert, about Dad's inheritance, was it always decided that you would be the sole heir? I tried to ask casually. It was hard to bear the thought that maybe I wasn't loved by my father, but I wanted to discuss it properly. Huh? What do you mean? All of the inheritance goes to me, my brother sounded surprised. I thought Naomi had told him, but it seems he was hearing about it for the first time, but the will was genuine, so the result wouldn't change. I explained the situation to my brother. I see. So the handwriting on the will is definitely Dad's, and that's all it said, huh? Got it. I'll need some time to think this through. I'll get back to you. I'll also make sure Naomi doesn't do anything until I've made a decision, my brother said before ending the call. I waited patiently for my brother's next move, feeling both intrigued and hopeful. A few days later, my brother contacted me again. He suggested that I look into Naomi's suspicious activities by hiring a private investigator. He also advised me to claim my rightful share from him. This legitimate share is the minimum amount of inheritance guaranteed to a family member, based on their position in the family. In my case, I could claim a portion from my father's $25 million inheritance. Even though the will said all the inheritance should go to my brother, this legal provision would still entitle me to inherit $25 million. However, my husband and my brother's wife were not happy with my decision. The decision has already been made. Don't mess it up now, they protested. But there was more to my brother's advice. I'm not asking for the $25 million. All I want is this house filled with memories of our father and the land. The total estate is worth $100 million, but the real estate property is only worth $10 million. I'll give up all the rest of the inheritance to my brother. Still, the two of them continued to argue. If this continues to escalate, my brother has instructed me to hire a lawyer to join the discussion. If it comes to that, I'm sure I'll inherit $25 million exactly, I asserted confidently. My husband and Naomi fell silent. Eventually, it seemed like they realized it was more beneficial to settle for the $10 million worth of real estate. We finally reached an agreement on how to divide the inheritance. A few days later, I received the results of an investigation I had requested about Naomi from a private investigator. I immediately contacted my brother. After many ups and downs, we successfully completed the process of inheriting our father's estate. My brother Ken rushed from abroad to help during the process. I inherited the family home and land, valued at $10 million. My brother inherited the rest of the estate, which amounted to $90 million. Naomi and my husband seemed pleased with how things were going as they had hoped. After finishing the inheritance process, the four of us left the law office and went back to our father's house. While enjoying a cup of tea in the living room, my brother spoke up, placing his smartphone on the table. "Great job, everyone. Now that we successfully inherited Dad's estate, there's something I want to discuss," he said with a smile. With that, he took out a document from his pocket and laid it out on the table. The expressions on my husband's and Naomi's faces turned pale as they read the contents. The document was titled, "It's a Will." At the end of it, there was my father's signature and stamp, dating back about 5 years ago. "This is a will that Dad gave to me when he was still working. It was made with 2 witnesses at a notary office, so it's legally valid," my brother explained. He continued, saying that our father had prepared it before he had a stroke. With his wife already passed away, he wanted to ensure his children would be taken care of if anything happened to him. The will stated that 1/4 of the total estate was to go to Ken, who already had a significant amount of wealth, and 3/4 to Catherine, the housewife. My brother gently held the will, explaining that our father had been clear about not changing it. He had stated in the will that any changes must have a reason stated, otherwise they would be considered invalid. It seemed our father, knowing the size of his estate, had prepared early to avoid any family conflicts. He was really pushing himself at work. I think he was considering all sorts of things like what would happen if he fell gravely ill or became senile. My brother said, his hand caressing the will. The will also contained a heartfelt addendum. "I hope that there will be no conflicts over the inheritance and that the family will continue to live happily together." It was filled with our father's warm wishes for the family. Learning that I was loved by my father just as much as my brother touched me deeply, and my heart swelled with emotion. However, my husband and Naomi beside me grew pale. "So, if you're going to change this will, the reason has to be stated, or it's all null and void. Even if it's in my dad's handwriting, maybe he was forced to write it when he was in a delirious state due to dementia." My husband suddenly slammed the table with a fierce expression. He glared at my brother and growled, "Hey Ken, do you have any proof? Are you calling me a criminal?" "I never said you forged the will, did I, Robert?" My brother replied calmly, then glanced at his wife Naomi sitting next to him. Naomi remained silent, which struck me as odd. Naomi had informed me about our father's passing, and I had attended the funeral. However, after returning abroad, I hadn't been informed about anything regarding the inheritance despite it involving me. My brother seemed to be looking to his wife Naomi for some reason, but she still said nothing. "Stop your arguing. The inheritance is already decided. The $90 million is ours. It doesn't matter what you say now," my husband shouted back. "What do you mean by ours? I'm the one who inherited it," my brother countered calmly. "Shut up," my husband snapped. The conversation was going in circles. "I'm not sure what you mean, but the $90 million I inherited is just worthless paper," my brother said calmly. "What?" my husband exclaimed, surprised. My brother explained patiently. "Our father's estate was valued at $100 million. Apart from the real estate, all the assets were stocks in our father's company. When our father was in charge, the company was doing well, and the stocks were valuable. But after he stepped down, the company started losing money, and it looked like it might go bankrupt. In the 3 years before he died, the stocks that were once worth over $90 million became practically worthless." But that can't be true, can it?" my husband stammered. "It's the truth. I inherited knowing that. I plan on restructuring my father's company, and since it didn't involve you, I didn't tell you," my brother explained. My husband seemed shaken and muttered to himself. He couldn't seem to accept the reality of the situation. That's when Naomi finally spoke up for the first time. Hold on, wait a minute. What are you saying? Are you saying I inherited worthless stocks while Catherine got $10 million? That's not fair, Naomi exclaimed loudly. Beside Naomi's outburst, my brother sighed. Naomi, I inherited our father's estate. You weren't at a disadvantage in any way. Why are you so upset? But I thought we were getting all of that $100 million. I had plans for it. My husband glared sharply at the flustered Naomi. So you and Robert were plotting to get all of our father's money, and while doing that, you were having an affair, weren't you? My brother accused. Naomi and my husband remained silent, frozen in place. Why? Naomi muttered hoarsely. My brother glanced at her before continuing. After our phone call, I started suspecting Naomi. Why didn't she talk to me about the inheritance? Why had her interactions with me been so brief lately, and why had she started ignoring my calls? I thought something was fishy, and when I saw her pictures on social media, I knew she was cheating on me. And soon, I'll be getting a lot of money. I'll be living like a famous person. I've been discussing with my girlfriend how we'll spend it. She said we'll have a blast when we get the money. I'm thrilled. But Naomi, I don't recall talking about this with you. I wonder who this girlfriend is. No, wait. You're misunderstanding, Naomi interrupted. Ignoring his confused wife, my brother brought out a bait envelope. He took some photos out and placed them next to the will. They showed Naomi and Robert going into a hotel together, looking very close. It was obvious they were in a tight relationship. I've been overseas, you know. I hired a private investigator to look into things because I was curious about your girlfriend, my brother said, showing the solid proof. Naomi started trembling. Looking at Naomi's affair partner, my husband, I noticed he was furious, completely red-faced, which was quite different from the pale Naomi. Curse you, poking around like some creep. What's all this nonsense about your silly will in these photos? It's absurd. My husband exploded. Stop. Suddenly, Naomi raised her voice. She approached my brother with a fake charm, like a bad actor. Hey, you're mistaken. It's all a mix-up. It's all Robert's fault. He convinced me that if I went along with him, I'd get all of your dad's money. Hey, wouldn't you want to get $100 million? I thought it was for your own good. My husband, who felt deeply hurt, stared at Naomi in shock. This photo, we were just fooling around. You were always away, and I felt lonely. But you're also to blame, right? Please forgive me. The $90 million is off the table now. Let's take the $10 million from Catherine's property. Did you fake the will? I asked. Huh? No way. Robert did it. He said it was simple and had it written by your dad. Look, it's not my fault, Naomi explained. When the truth about the fake will came out, my husband got furious and tried to attack Naomi, but my brother stepped in quickly. You jerks. You've got nothing on me. You'll pay for this in hell. My husband yelled, kicking a chair. While he raged, my brother calmly watched and casually took out his phone. Oh, looks like my phone was recording the whole time since we got home. I forgot to turn it off. My husband went pale and fell silent. By the way, I didn't mention it earlier, but this room has security cameras that record everything. I installed them because of Dad's bad memory, just in case something happened, my brother added. In the quiet room, only my brother kept speaking. Forging a will is a serious crime. Your earlier threat could get you in legal trouble. There's a police station nearby, and they'd be here soon if we report it. But since the inheritance matter is settled now, and if you promise not to touch Catherine's things again, maybe we don't need to involve the police. What do you say? While saying this, my brother began using his phone. I might as well send this recording to my computer overseas. After silently watching everything, I pulled a document from my bag and handed it to my husband. Robert, I want a divorce. Wait, hold on. Think about this. I'm sorry. We've been together for so long, haven't we? Who do you think has been providing for you all this time? My husband pleaded. I've had it. No more excuses. Either agree to the divorce or I'm calling the police, I said firmly, gripping my smartphone tightly with a determined expression. Robert slumped his shoulders and nodded. Naomi, it's over between us. You were planning to take the money and be with Ken, weren't you? I heard your conversations with him from a private investigator, I accused. Naomi hung her head, covering her face with her hands. After our divorces, my brother and I went our separate ways. Robert moved out of the house, thinking he had secured a significant inheritance, only to find out it was worthless. Naomi revealed the truth about the forged will, and everything that unfolded in the living room was captured on camera. Robert must have been furious, but he was powerless. The surveillance camera, initially installed for my father's care, also documented evidence of Robert's emotional abuse. Even if I had inherited my father's assets, I planned to use them as evidence in a divorce trial if Robert resisted. When I shared this with my brother, he suggested we utilize the camera too. After the divorce, rumors of Robert's affairs spread at his workplace, leading to him losing his job. His colleagues had seen him frequenting hotels with a woman who wasn't his wife. With his parents gone and now jobless and homeless, Robert vanished. While I had sought a portion of his assets, I wanted nothing more to do with him, especially after inheriting some wealth. Naomi, the woman Robert cheated with, faced the same downfall as him. Despite pleading, "I don't want us to end. Please don't leave me." During the divorce proceedings with my brother Ken, the divorce was finalized when solid evidence was presented during mediation. Naomi had been spending recklessly while Robert was absent, but she was stuck with the bills, leaving her with nothing. Since she hadn't been working and had no home to go back to like Robert, she's now struggling to get by in a rundown public housing project, relying on welfare. Meanwhile, my brother Ken continues to work overseas, but he's selling the house he shared with Naomi and will be moving in with me into our father's house. With Ken's financial help, my life has become more stable, and I've been able to live comfortably. The value of the land left by my father has been steadily increasing, now worth over $100 million. Free from the responsibilities of caring for my dad and the emotional abuse from my ex-husband, I'm finally living a peaceful life, with time for myself. Alone in a spacious house, I started to think about how to make the most of it. Around that time, I watched a TV show about foreign exchange students staying with host families, and it gave me an idea. I decided to open up my spare rooms for rent. I offer affordable rooms to college and exchange students, and now my house is bustling with life. We share meals, play games, and help each other with schoolwork. It feels like we're one big happy family. On days when I have some free time, I enjoy reading books at the local library. Since I don't have kids of my own, and my marriage had drifted apart, I used to worry about being lonely after losing my father. But now, my days are filled with energy and joy. Even at my age, it's fulfilling to connect with young people and give back to the community in my own small way. There were times when life seemed too hard to handle, but now I have my brother, my roommates, and the people in my neighborhood to share life with. Every day is filled with contentment and happiness. I'm grateful for the simple joy